This week's episode on Around the Coin, we focus on Quora's recent Top Writers Meetup, how Quora will eventually monetize, and the secrets to getting the most out of Quora's brilliant community by two of the most active writers in the game.
All right, guys, this is episode 20 of Around the Coin. This is a bit of a unique episode. Today, we're going to be talking about Quora, what it's meant for all of us, how we were able to use it. And Brian is actually up in Palo Alto after the top writers meeting got out, and he's enjoying a little bit of poolside action, I understand, today, Brian.
Yeah, just a bit.
Faisal,
morning, guys.
How's things in your neck of the woods?
All is good. Good morning to you.
Yeah, bit of a week. Brian, how is the top writers meetup?
It was absolutely unexpectedly amazing, actually. I've been to I think one or two of these before, but they weren't really top writers. They were more meet and greets. And I was excited because it was an invitation to actually come to Quora's headquarters on floor 4, but nobody got to go to floor 5, the secret floor of the complex that controls the Quora world.
Where are they now? Are they right in San Francisco? Or are they in Palo Alto?
No, they're in Mountain View, and downtown Mountain View, and it's really quite a nice area. I mean, the after parties were basically, we took over the streets. A bunch of Quora nerds controlling the town till all hours of the morning.
Was it programming? Was that the... I'm kidding.
They weren't programming. Yeah, yeah. We were creating content while we were moving through town. They were testing a new Quora app. While you consume alcoholic beverages. But
so this crew must have been quite a gathering, right? I mean, these are some of the. Do they look at it by top content? Is it a community generated list? Is it by the number of answers as a whole? Who gets picked to go up there?
There's an old coffee can in the back of the office that they shake up. I have no idea how I got to be on this list of so many esteemed and amazing individuals. They don't really disclose the exact matrix that they use to determine this, but I could tell you the individuals I had come across who I've read. It's always hard to place the person with their writing, and it's very seductive to get to know somebody through their words and then meet them in person. And I'm a study of human beings, and I don't care as shy as somebody might be or as extrovert. I find them just as fascinating and interesting. And I think part of the issue with Quora is it tends to pull a lot of introverts in. A lot of high knowledge individuals tend to be somewhat more introverted. And I think just the fact that everybody knew each other sort of beforehand, primarily deeply by following what they've written, has made it a lot of people open up and surface their personalities a lot more than I think you would normally discover. And that was
how many people showed up?
I would estimate maybe over 200. It was not always clear because it kind of flowed into essentially 2 rooms. And the thing that I found fascinating is, as more people joined, it actually allowed people to become more conversational, and it got really, really loud. It got so crazy in there that we actually had the fire alarm go off.
Really?
I heard some people were vaping or something, and then the fire alarm went off. I
have no. Actually, I think what really happened is being in the Valley, there is this whole production of new office people moving in and moving out, and somebody down in the basement knocked something that made the fire alarm go off, and so that became a bit of an interesting thing because everybody had to leave the building, and we were pretty much the only people there on a Friday evening, right? And so we got out and all hung out in a courtyard, and I think that experience probably was more monumental to me because I got to meet people in sort of a more open setting. The office was open. It was in their lunch area. eating area, but it just seemed, I almost wanted to have everybody hang out down there.
It was a good change of pace.
Yeah, it was really great. And meeting people that have such a dedication to their knowledge set is always fascinating, because they literally are the 1/2 of 1%. It's not like everybody there is going to be billionaires or control the world or anything like that. A lot of these people are just incredibly knowledgeable and humble with their knowledge.
Yeah, it feels money is not their motivation by any means.
There's no doubt.
Right.
Although it strikes me that a lot of these people could have been doing a lot of the things they were saying quite amazingly.
Because right now, Quora doesn't make money, right? No one makes money from their content. It's not like YouTube where people are actually creating content for the purpose of monetization.
Yes, this was monetization was actually discussed. Adam D'Angelo, the brain of Quora, as I put it, with Mark Bodnick being the heart of Quora. They really are, the two of them have really balanced what I think is an amazing product. Adam gave a speech and a question and answer, and he really genuinely wants to just let this grow organically and to find ways for more people to join and to surface their knowledge, even though they may not feel that they are, quote unquote expert or Mensa high IQ material. And we talked about ways to break down the barrier to allow, I give an example. One of the things that blew me away, I'm a nerd in a lot of things, but traffic control systems have always been interesting to me. And, surfacing great information on Quora for me was always hard. One of the ways I did that in the early days with their earlier algorithm was just to follow a whole lot of people and have a huge fire hose. I would call it Niagara Falls. And I would get so much information that I didn't know I wanted to know. This is my whole Quora journey. It's my attraction to this thing. It's all the stuff that I didn't know I wanted to know. And that's the challenge with any algorithm, is how do you surface information to people that's not just trivial, that's something that's touching them. We can find trivial stuff on YouTube and, dogs chasing their tail, and that's maybe things you didn't know you wanted to know, and hopefully you forget soon. But in Quora, there's this a branching tree of ideas that come when you find out how things are working. And I'll surface this thing. I was following different topics. It wasn't working very well. So I started following just random people who I found interesting and may have just posed one really good question or one really good answer. And this gentleman, and unfortunately I forget his name now because I'm challenging myself, but he is a traffic control expert, and he's, I believe, a second generation individual working in this. His dad worked in the days of mechanical traffic control devices. And we're talking about stoplights and caution signs and automatic. And I was always intrigued by this. And so he started answering a machine gun line of questions and answers that had been just out there randomly. And he became, I think, an immediate star just by the fact.
It's funny, once you have this sort of this niche of knowledge and you could spray it, it's amazing how quickly you can become an expert, right? Perceived expert in your field.
But I tend not to like to use the word expert because it to my mind it's a defining endpoint, and a lot of experts who call themselves experts, like in a maybe somewhat arrogant sort of manner, I think almost shut themselves down to opening themselves up to new knowledge. I would just say that these are people who have a great understanding of their domain experiences, and this individual definitely had it. And anyway, I started interacting, and one of the things I asked was about mesh networks and how these things communicate, because I just wanted to know that. And he said, there aren't really any at this point. I go, so how do they sequence these traffic lights? And he goes, well, it's sort of winging it. And I go, what do you mean? They take all this data and don't they compute it? And he goes, no, not really. And it's only to a degree which would shock you. And that just immediately opened my mind to, holy, these traffic control systems that I've been thinking that we're sequencing cities, that I assumed really stunk, really do stink because they're really not doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. And that's pretty much what he was saying. So right there in that one conversation, I realized that there was opportunity for innovation at some very sliver segmented market.
God, I almost think there's no better group to pry for knowledge to find business opportunities than that group of 200 individuals from that Quora meetup. You know, if you're going to talk to them about opportunities, problems in their worlds, God, no one has a better handle on that. Even if you almost look at them from an advisory point of view, that's a very interesting crowd.
You know, Mike, the thing that's always struck me, and I'm guilty of this myself, is we spout out a lot of stuff. Maybe more people I've come across than myself, and they just willingly give out incredible information. And I sometimes wonder, what would it be like if there was an editing team that was recording this in some manner and shaping it sort of on a grease board of, okay, here's some business ideas, here's some plans. Here's some interconnections, sort of like the brainstorming sessions. I've had so many. I can't even count how many I've had in 30 years, where some incredible business ideas came out of. And these were always free flowing. The more free flowing and bizarre, the more radical and impactful the ideas, and the more successful they were.
Yeah, even to provide a spark. So Brian, from this group, you know, you were there. This is not your first meetup, right? Have you been to another Top Writers meetup?
It wasn't a Top Writers. It was more of a sort of a Quora get-together. And that had a lot of very high wattage individuals in the startup community.
So is there any sort of drama between who gets invited to the Top Writers? Do people get booted out if they stop writing?
No. Every top writer, I think 2013 was invited.
Yes.
And they had given the invitation, I think, about almost 2.5 months prior.
Yes.
It was being talked on Quora a lot, especially on the Facebook forums of Quora, the pages that they have for top writers, etc. And but Brian, any names you want to shout out?
Well, obviously, Mark and Adam. My view is I am so very thankful about their graciousness and their desire to not just build an algorithm that surfaces knowledge, if you will, but to actually build that community. And, I might get his first name wrong. Jonathan Brill, I believe, is the writer liaison that they just brought in. And now this guy, in and of himself, you could watch this guy lead a startup almost anywhere. Incredible leader, incredibly dedicated, was behind the scenes linking people up who he thought they needed to meet. He purposely, but by not behind the scenes, made me link up with people who I knew I definitely needed to meet. But it's hard to read the name tags. It's hard to place the faces. Some people don't have. Some people have avatars or nature scenes, so you don't really know who they are. And he was linking me up, and so we got again. I was blown away by him. Adam, Mark Bodnick, as far as I'm concerned, is just an amazing individual. And going around, Jay Wacker, who is probably, a silent mentor to me as far as his mind. This is
he's a recent hire at Quora comes from physics, right? From physics.
He is a top, in my view, a top theoretician, a physicist, and he's also a Stanford professor, and he's working still indirectly within the field of physics, but he saw this collection of human knowledge, and he was attracted to it like all of us here. I think anybody listening to this is probably in some ways seduced by what Quora offers. And I think it's a proper seduction, if you will.
Brian, let me ask you this. Yeah. We're looking at Quora. They've raised $140 million. Just last month, they raised their largest round of $80 million. What's coming down the pipeline? I mean, are they planning a monetization approach? Are they looking at a major product update in some capacity? What's the inside scoop on what's coming down the pipe at Quora?
It's interesting because we know they have to monetize, right? And they're being extremely thoughtful about this. Adam D'Angelo, he graciously opened up a Q&A session. None of us were allowed to record it, and we generally aren't allowed to speak to deep detail. But it's no secret that they need to monetize. It's no secret that they need to continue to attract incredible knowledge and new users.
Well, I don't know how many of you have thought about this thing, but every good company eventually has people leaving or etc. and then make new tech companies. Apple has done this, Intel has done this, HP.
Yes.
Around the Coin was probably the first, if at least I know, spin-off from Quora, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Indirectly.
Yes.
I mean, all three of us met through Quora. All three of us communicated on Quora, got to know each other on Quora, and here we are.
It is an amazing. I cannot tell you. I would say in my time on Quora, I've met more incredible individuals than my entire existence on the planet combined.
So, Brian, are we going to start to see display ads? Are we going to start to see what are their options as far as monetization?
I think the New York Times article said that 2015 was the year for that, right? The monetization.
Well, they're not putting an exact date on it. They're not running out of money anytime soon. By getting one of the top minds in the world, I think, at organizing information, a top theoretical physicist, to sort of attack this problem. Because their problem really is how do we get the stuff that we knew that we would love, that we knew that we didn't know we loved, or I'm saying it improper. But essentially, most of my Quora experience is I discover stuff that I didn't know I wanted to know. And that's one of my themes. If I was going to be a parrot at Quora, one of the things I kept repeating, and another individual who works at Quora is just a brilliant data scientist, Yair Levine, originally from Israel and working at Quora from, I think, very early days. And we had this phenomenal discussion about how we can surface data and how do we build these algorithms. And, I believe that the human being is more visual, even those people who claim that they're not visual, because we store our information in our mind in a visual context. When we store a calculation, I'm as a math guy, when I store a calculation away, it's a visualization. It's not the numbers, it's the symbols. So it's a symbolic memory. And I said the way I would love to discover new content on Quora is visually, like a bubble, like all these bubbles of topics that are taking off. The bubbles grow as those topics get larger, and they vibrate and change color according to the activity level at that particular moment. And I would love to dive into a sea. It doesn't have to be, 3D glasses with an Oculus Rift interface. It could just be this graphical interface that allows me to surface data and information that I otherwise could not find in a linear type of layout. And so I really carried that flag. I hope Jay and Yair and Mark and Adam maybe buy into that notion, because I think it's a lot of opportunity to create these new interfaces to find knowledge.
Brian, do you think they layer on a monetization approach of expanding the visibility in the sense of what a promote does? So if you have credits on Quora, you can promote your answers and your questions to essentially get greater visibility and increase the likelihood of people reading, upvoting, answering questions that you have, which come in handy when you have specific business questions you want to expose. And there's a lot of, I would say, financial incentive to grow those. That seems like an obvious approach to say, you can buy in credits, right? One credit's worth, there's a going rate, one credit's worth $2. I would imagine that would be their first approach to monetization, testing it how credits went.
Absolutely. And we're like mind melding on this. This is exactly, and I'm sure Faisal's in the same sense. We look at this transaction system called Quora credits, and it started out. I think a lot of people on Quora at the time thought it to be a joke, and I saw the power immediately. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so big about nano transactions and microtransactions, and it's equating a value to an upvote, a monetary value within maybe a Quora coin. By the way,
Quora coin. Wow, you've heard it here first. Let's go.
I have reserved the domain name. My good friends at Quora. It is available for you at no charge. QuoraCoin.com. But what I believe.
So we're definitely going the cryptocurrency. Do you think they even launch with a USD? They go straight to crypto.
I'm fantasizing. They have not talked about that. That's my fantasy. But let's back off. If we look at the premise of what the credits were about, it was a way to sort of be a flow control because at one time, and I'm not so certain today, that it cost you money to place cost you Quora credits to place a question in the system, and then to get that question surfaced to a broader audience outside your group of followers, you would have to spend credits. So essentially, it was you were getting paid for the content you created within this core economy. And this is a brilliant thing. I think it has not been used even close to the level it could be used. And one of the things, Mike, and this is why I think you're such a great business mind, is you immediately saw the prospect of, okay, can we take that credit and convert it into something that is a commercial promotion, but not necessarily an advertisement, maybe a discussion around a product, maybe a way to engage around a product, a way to maybe use the hive mind of Quora to help build what a company might want to be doing. Maybe let's call it test marketing. Here I am in Palo Alto and Mountain View, and I ran into 5 vehicle car studies that people wanted to give me $50 gift cards if I would please drive their vehicle. One was Cadillac. One, strangely enough, was Porsche. Like, you're going to pay me to drive a Porsche? Okay, this is interesting. Now, I get that sometimes in Beverly Hills, other parts, New York sometimes, but it was more so here. And I think the reason why is you have people who, just by definition of the cost of living out here, and Stanford, very close to Stanford right now, they want to hear their deep-seated feelings. And this is kind of similar to what Quora is doing, right? All of us
so true.
Are offering our opinions on
things. It sure is. And everyone has this, everyone's got the feeling they want to be heard, right?
Yeah, and I talked a lot about this, and I think people are embarrassed by this, but we all have this sort of desire to be, I wouldn't call it egotistical, but, sort of, we want to get the stuff that's inside of our head out. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't care who you are. There's value in that knowledge. And connecting the people who find the value to your knowledge is the challenge. That's what Jay Wacker and Yair Levine and Adam and Mark have to be tasked with.
Let me ask you this, Faisal.
Sure.
You're sitting here with 3,136 answers as of today.
Wow.
If someone says to you at Quora, hey, we're thinking about a monetization approach where people can bid and ask other people to answer questions. We're going to start to advertise on answers. We're going to start there's multiple ways they can do it. One of which may incentivize people who have a ton of value already in Quora to start getting paid for those. Do you, as a top writer now, sitting there with 3,000 plus answers, are you pushing in some way? Do you really want to get paid for the work you've put in already? Was there any incentive along the way thinking, I know they're going to monetize someday. If I just keep writing and writing and writing, eventually they're going to turn on the switch and I'm going to, start raking in cash ahead of everyone else. Was there ever that thought process going through the thousands of answers, or was it more?
It would be conniving of me to say no, but everyone thinks about that, sure. I'll tell you one thing. My initial investment in time on Quora was to get to be somewhat of an authority in my field, both from an SEO level, Google searching, etc., which definitely is there now. And I think I wrote about this thing way back on one of the answers on Quora. What would be great is if Quora had a monetization policy. People are operating a lot of blogs. And if ads are going to be placed on those blogs, if they have some sort of a revenue share model, I would promote that blog more on Quora and get more traffic on Quora, and hence more, adverts can be displayed. And if Quora has a revenue share, that'll, be it small, doesn't matter, but, it adds to the bottom line. So it's just an incentive. And when you incentivize something, obviously you get more loyalty and retention, and think that's what Quora would be aiming for in the long run.
I agree.
Do you think in the interim, is there going to be a monetization scheme? So if you look at Pinterest, for instance, I know the guys over at Hello Society very well, and they make a lot of money basically allowing companies to advertise on Pinterest. You see any third-party companies coming up to you, Faisal, if they sent you a message and said, "Hey, we're going to start paying you to integrate a little bit of, a little bit of Nike or a little bit of, Adidas or Verizon or some sort of company incentive into the answers." Is that something that top writers you think would respond to and start doing?
I think there's a U.S. regulation on that, right? On blogging for paid interest, you have to make a disclosure. But nonetheless, I think that's something that could be done. I think more importantly, people are going to be looking at Quora and seeing, this guy is authoritative. For example, if someone's writing in the space for coding or housing or traffic lights. I think Quora has a really, really good system for going down a particular vertical and then targeting the market companies who would like to advertise over there, and I think they'll get a good bang for their buck over there, and they can demand a premium. It's not like they would be paying the regular CPM rate or I don't know whatever the.
Faisal, walk me through. Yeah, I was just going to say, you kind of inspired me here. If you're looking at someone joins Quora today, right? 99% of the world has never heard of Quora yet. If they come in and they see you, they're interested in the payment world, the technology world, they're going to see you and Brian and a bunch of others, and they're saying, boy, they're just so far ahead of me. How do I get to that level? What was your journey like when you first joined? I'm sure it was just this little site. Yeah, probably at the time and didn't even have CSS on there.
It's to become somewhat recognized on Quora takes. People have asked me this, and I tell them, I said, 1 year of constant writing is just when you will get barely noticed on Quora. 1 year.
Yeah.
If you want to be somewhat of an authority, put in 2.5 good years, and you'll get somewhere. Nothing short of that.
But it's not just writing, right? It's
interactive.
Definitive.
And someone said this thing, to get on Quora, and it's very important in my view. You have to give the keys to the castle.
Yeah.
You cannot keep the information to yourself. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
You have to share this thing. This was, by the way, said by a very good friend of mine, Megan Burton, who's the CEO of CoinX.
Yeah.
She said that. She said you have to give the keys to the castle away, and that's what a lot of people on Quora are doing. They are giving information that otherwise may be held for whatever reason, or it's not easy to find, etc. But you come to Quora, you ask a question, and sure enough, there's someone out there who says, "Well, you know what? Here, I'll give you the keys. I'll tell you what the secret is."
So, Faisal, let me ask you this. I'm sure through your 3,000 answers and years of writing, you've seen a little bit of the dark side of Quora. Is there any times where people come to you and message you and say, "Hey, can you write about my company?" or can I pay you to do this? Or can you change your answer a little bit here? What are some of the things?
Never. I mean, I get a very decent size of in-mail every week, but never had that. The only thing that's and that's a good thing. The only thing that I've had is people actually contact and say, regarding such and such answer you wrote, would you mind willing to talk to us off the record, or in a private setting with my company, or I'd like to get to know you more, or and consulting assignments, et cetera, et cetera. So that comes out. That's a natural byproduct.
I'm going to have to confess that all the above has happened with me. So, I've, early.
You have a higher people rank than me, and so definitely people would come.
And sometimes, sometimes I'm a little too early in announcing what I know is going to happen in the future, and it makes me more controversial than I really want to be. But then again, I'm this excited guy that wants to tell everybody, hey, 2 or 3 years from now, or like with Apple getting involved in payments, I had 2 payment startups ask me specifically to lower my tone on that because it is going to impact their ability to get financing rounds. And and I said, this is what's going to happen. I said, no, that's not going to happen. One particular company said, no, that's not going to happen. It's a fantasy of your mind, and you have a hidden agenda. So it kind of turned dark in that sense. Obviously, today, I guess if you want, I don't keep score of this, but I'm vindicated. This individual, I think, has gone a long way to sort of apologize for their behavior. But in the early days, it was very much a very personal thing. And again, I try not to, I try to write nothing but positive stuff, and anything that's even remotely negative, here's my decoder ring on it. It's because I absolutely love the people and the company. And I'm frustrated because I do not have a communication channel. Not that I deserve one, right? I mean, I'm very, very honored when I have the ability to speak to people and talk directly. But if it's in my domain experience, right, and it's stuff that I know, and like at the Quora party, a lot of people were asking me about a specific startup, and they said, "How did
Was its name Square?
Yeah, all right. So Square, and I love I love.
Finally said it.
Darn it, I got out of the bag. So they said, how did you know in 2010 all of this was going to happen? Because I had one individual there who literally printed out all of my predictions in paper right there. And they said, you have 100% accuracy. What the heck is going on? They literally cornered me. And I was looking for help because I didn't know who this person was. I mean,
oh my
seriously.
God, Brian, you have a certified stalker.
Yeah, there you go.
No. The story actually is quite nice, and I was really touched by this. They said, "Listen, I was going to go to work for that company, and I was using a lot of your ideas." And he was actually being apologetic. He goes, "I was using a lot of your ideas to get a job offer, and I tried twice, and I didn't have anything to say. I read your Quora stuff. I went in with 2 of your ideas, and they wanted to hire me on the spot."
So
and
Brian,
I said, hold on. No, the story, you got to hear the rest of it. So the story goes on, and I said, "So did you take the job?" And he said, "No." And I said, "What happened?" He goes, "Well, I started reading more and more, and I realized that either I'm going to have to get in there and hire you, or I'm going to have to come clean." He goes, because I wasn't able to think these things. I go, "Listen, if you were there long enough, you would probably have been a master of change." And so it was kind of like a bittersweet sort of thing, but he's going on. And so I think the good news is he's involved in his own payment startup. And frankly, I think in 2 or 3 years, you and all of us will be talking to him. Just absolutely brilliant individual. But like Faisal was saying, came about this with a love for payments, but not the knowledge set. And classic Stanford, kind of left Stanford kind of scenario, kind of bummed around the programming community, and fell in love with payments. I could name 5, 6 companies, one that has a whole lot of financing and they don't have a single product out. And the CEO of the... Yeah, all right. So spent some time.
It's a small world, Brian. There's really not too many of these companies out there.
It's a small world after all. So we're in the boat now in Disneyland. But so the thing that shocked me was how deeply people take what one writes, and it really. My earlier days, I used to be a lot more sort of direct, and it's not like I hold things back, but I really am trying to be thoughtful. And like recently, Square came out.
What is your strategy, right, Brian? When you're writing, you seem to have a lot of craft behind your writing. I'll say, right? There seems to be a lot of intention. Maybe you'll bait companies a little bit. What is there a particular objective you're trying to get out of there? And in your answer, think about it. Where if I'm writing, if I'm working at a company, if I'm a software engineer, if I'm a marketing guy, and I want to start my own company, or I want to level up my own company, what can people do to sort of increase the value they get out of Quora? Because I think you've done a great job of answering your answers in a way that sort of allude that you know more, and it's really interesting to read. But I'm sure that's intentional.
Well, the very first thing I'll tell anybody about anything they do in life, and it sounds like a bad graduation speech, is you got to really dig deep for your passion. And I think that's one of the reasons all of us are here, is to try to surface that. And I think that's the beauty of our journey. So if you start believing in something that you're writing about and you really love it objectively from all aspects, it's natural that you're going to study it in all dimensions. You're going to study its history, its relevance, its expansion. And then if you really go down the road, you start interacting with it. Even if you're not in that business, you might go out and, like, let's say, there's people I know that love payments that have never worked in the industry, and they study it from every possible angle. The thing that I think is profoundly important for any subject, but specifically payments, is to understand that there is a history. And a lot of times when you see me sort of, alluding to things, I'll say it, but it's almost like a parrot, and I got to slap myself. I need an editor, damn it. But is that a lot of the answers have already been supplied for us. And it does not mean that all things were already done before. It means that human beings have not changed in 250, 300,000 years, and we are emotional beings. And I don't care how rational you become, you will make your final decisions as an emotional decision. And so when we read and we write, we should always try to find the emotion and the passion about what we're writing about. And if we can't do that, go back and say, why am I writing this? And I'm not saying everybody's going to do that to the nth degree. It does take time. It is a journey. The more emotion you put into something, the more exposed you are as a human being. I'm sure Faisal and Mike, you've exposed yourself literally with what your journey has been through the startup world. This is a hard thing. I can't begin to tell you that a lot of people who have
totally. We were approached by just about the full gamut of people, entrepreneurs looking for advice on what they should do, reporters asking us why we did it, what the impact was, investors saying, what was the repercussion of the company. So I think there's big value in doing that. Faisal, what did you think about your perception change over the years? Now, when you write now, is there a different mindset or goal than when you initially started? And what would you say to people who are writing now early in their stage, or even if they've had hundreds of answers on here and they're trying to get more out of their answers and interactions, between upvotes, private messages, answers, blogs, I have a blog, you have a blog, we have a podcast. There's a lot going on. How do you sort of sift through that and say, this is the things that work, these are the channels that get the most value?
I, for one, tell them, there is a world outside the U.S., so that's one thing. That by
you heard it here first.
There is, that by itself takes so much of my time and energy when I write. Because people are just assuming that it's just the northern and southern borders of the U.S. that makes it. But outside the world, and I just try to give I try to give either the product validation of how it would be outside the U.S. or this is how it's being architected right now, how the solutions are being built outside the U.S. right now. My interaction with the U.S. payment system is only when it interacts with my side of the world. I do not deal with a payment system that is absolutely U.S. concentric. I mean, that's something, there are hundreds of, if not thousands of people already in the U.S. doing that. So I just have to be a little cautious. Sometimes you come across an unnecessary argument with someone who doesn't share your view, and I have some very simple words to say to that. Feel free to disagree. I mean, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I move on. I don't hold back.
I actually like the dissension. I wish there was more ways to encourage it, especially on blog posts, right? I mean, people will do comments, but I think I gain more value, and this is one of the secret things about Quora that I absolutely love, and most people just don't seem to see it, is that commenting interactions to me is sometimes, on a day-to-day basis, more rewarding than all the other things that are above the surface. And sometimes it is people...
I want to take a second and point out that, Brian, you're perhaps the only person who actually uses the person's full name when commenting, and, you sign it with your name, so... Kudos to you on those points.
Yeah, it does look great. I'll say that. Yeah, there's a brand consistency there.
Well, it's not that. It's my view is that a lot of comments are used for trolling activity. And if there is a method to my madness, I want to make it very clear to the person I'm talking to that I am right in front of them, looking at them in their eyes, and I'm talking to them. And I believe that we live in this world, and we've seen the outcome of it with the destruction that the internet's done in a lot of people's lives. You don't own your words. You go out there and you do a 140-character quip, and then you don't own it, and you walk away. And I think that is destroying our society in a lot of levels. And one of the ways I take that back, and I take my ownership of who I am and who you are, is I address you. And if there were ways to do that in a more personable way, I would do it. But that's the closest I've surmised. But the commenting is my way of being able to really not only thank that person for what they've done, but to also really kind of get into that finite detail about what they're doing. And it's been phenomenal. And it's better than a private message in some regards, because I think I'm creating a public side discussion after they've given a lecture, if you will, where a group of us sort of broke off and now we're talking to the lecturer. And I think Quora could do great by really highlighting what those comments are really about. And I try to use that typography. And I hopefully, they're listening and they see that. Again, you have too many things going on in Quora. All of a sudden it becomes very, very difficult to navigate. But we're all going to have to try to give our ideas, because to keep us all here as a group, to keep us all together, this is going to be the challenge of Quora's life. It's not, I'm telling you, it's not about monetization. I think that'll be easily done, and there's probably 20 great, brilliant ideas. It's how do you keep this group together? How do you stop them from straying off and yawning and saying, I've done with this? Because the first generation of the Quora elite, they have abandoned us. They've walked away. They're like, I don't have time.
Yeah, which is so sad.
Yeah, and I have a somewhat lower level of esteem for some of these individuals, because I really feel like in some ways it was a manipulation that they were going through, because they were so passionate and dedicated when it was, a group of Silicon Valley executives that were high-fiving. And now that the world, the unwashed masses come aboard, they're like, okay, read my 2009 posting, and I won't even recognize your upvote.
Yeah,
I think that's a challenge. I
think it's a huge challenge. Faisal, one of the biggest, I would say, criticisms of Quora is in their ability to grow outside the tech world, which is most of the world is outside the tech world. Yeah. What do you think of their ability to do that, or what would make them successful? Because right now you see people writing about topics in other arenas, but if you look closely, they tend to be tech originated or early adopter originated. So
I say to this that there's somewhat of a karma over here. People used to complain that Quora used to be San Francisco Valley and and purely Americanized until the Indians got on board, and now they dominate the traffic. And now I see the very same people saying, well, what is this person talking about? And it's funny to see so many Indian originated answers, which I can relate to very easily because they're my neighbors. But I have a whole lot of a lot of my friends across the pond have a whole lot of problems understanding and comprehending it. So that's one funny aspect. But I think it's gravitating. Imagine if Quora turned on Chinese, what would happen?
So do they have other languages now, or is it just English?
This was discussed.
Go ahead, Brian.
This was discussed actually. Somebody was brave. And I forget this young lady's name, but she took the microphone in the Q&A with Adam and asked, what is Quora doing about the Indian problem? With about 12% of the room Indian, maybe 15%. And they were the ones that laughed the loudest. It was a kind of an uncomfortable moment because it went very quiet for a minute. And she was Asian American, I imagine, a very clean American accent, but of Asian origin. So it was funny in a sense that we knew what the meme was about. But, the thing is, I don't call it an Indian problem. I call it a cultural disconnect problem. And I believe that this challenge, if solved, will have a revolutionizing effect on the transfer of information. I believe that we need to have an Indian problem. We need to have a China problem. We need to have I don't know, wherever the part of the world. There's a Ukrainian individual sitting next to me. And we had a wonderful conversation about the world, after that display. And so, yes, Americans are immensely arrogant. And I want to give a shout out to a gentleman, Paul Dellinger, who's Chinese origin. And he is probably one of the most concise experts on the Asian part of the world, China in specific, Taiwan.
Amazing.
And he comes back to me all the time and gives me color on different events. But anyway, the problem is, I think, solved by making a language-specific portion of Quora.
Similar to Wikipedia, where they break it off into different languages?
Yes, but Adam had a brilliant idea, and maybe I'm talking one bit out of class, but language translation service. Let's just say Faisal sees an incredible answer written in a dialect that he understands, and he does the language translation for that in an American English type of setting, not a British English that he is so good.
There is no American English.
No, I know. I'm trying to be facetious here, but no. My point is, he alluded to the fact that, and he didn't say he was going to make language specific. He said part of the challenge and the reward of Quora might be for people who understand both languages to translate and to typify what that question or answer is, and they might make an avenue and path to do that. I think it's brilliant, but I think the way you solve the language and cultural disconnect is you allow people to post in their own language. And then you allow people who find that content amazing, who have bilingual capability, to resurface it again. And I think it will balkanize Quora to a bit, and that's inevitable. But I think I'd rather be balkanized with people cutting holes in a wall and allowing us to talk than have people say we have an Indian problem.
Yeah.
Because let me tell you,
there's no Indian problem.
Yeah, no, and it's funny because even the people who are from India, who I talk to all the time, they say that there is an Indian problem too. But I can tell you, I've learned more from that part of the world from people who I barely understood what they were writing. Their questions were so hard. A lot of times they're just personal, instant, personal messages on Quora. I get a lot of
Brian, let me just ask you real quick.
Sure.
For the magnitude of visibility that you have, what do you see in terms of the volume and quality, or I would say, how many messages do you receive a day on average in Quora inbox from new people?
Inbox, it's funny because it started shifting and people finding me. I'll go a quick aside. I believe Quora has the ability to be LinkedIn far better than LinkedIn at some point in the future.
Agreed.
Let me go on record as saying that I'm not saying clone LinkedIn, but what Faisal has been saying from almost the beginning is so absolutely true. Your resume, Faisal, is on Quora. It is not on LinkedIn. And
I know. I get more queries from Quora than I get from LinkedIn.
We were just saying, Faisal, how many messages do you receive a day from new people?
I don't know, in a week, maybe 10, 15 directly on Quora.
Wow.
And about, 15 also off Quora, but from Quora.
All right. I'll expose some of this. Quora-related messages between 45 and 50 a day.
What? Really?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
But not all through the Quora mailbox. It is very strange. Here's what
happened.
And
are these new people, Brian? 45 new people?
New people, some of these are ongoing. Let's say new people, I'll quantify to about 60 or so new people a week.
Wow. Okay.
But here's what goes on, and this is what I'm trying to point out. They will somehow not want to message me through Quora. They'll go to my LinkedIn. They'll, either try to follow me through LinkedIn, which I'm not very active on. I have a great resume there. My Siberian University, but they'll find my message box there and then message me through email or something of that nature. And they say, I found you on Quora. And it started late 2011. 2012, it sort of flattened out. 2013, it exploded. And now it's the primary way my Quora audience interacts with me is going through LinkedIn or the other social platforms, or just digging up my email.
Brian, have you noticed the difference between the length of answers? Because you take a noticeably different approach than Faisal does. Faisal's got 3,000 answers. He tends to write real, I would say, short to medium length, consistent or concise answers. And they're fantastic. And he has a lot of them, and they seem to, go across many different subjects, where you have about 800. But boy, some of those are just, they could be theses. You write a thesis on one answer. What's your approach there? Do you consciously say, I want to put a lot more effort into one because of my return is better on my time? You must think about that.
First off, I need an editor, right? I really do. But second off, it's my dedication to the subject. It's my belief that if I'm going to upset the waters out there with something, whether agreed upon by the majority or not, I don't test whether or not somebody's going to agree with me or not when I'm posting. I just look at the subject and its merit. I follow my heart in it, and I say I have to do this subject justice. And I got to tell you, a lot of it is edited immensely. What you see on Quora is my distillation a lot of times, and you'll actually see trailing answers on other questions that are the continuation sometimes. And I realize that I'm asking a tremendous amount from my audience for them to read past 6 paragraphs. And I know it myself. I mean, I design my stuff, one of my strategies, I design my stuff to be skimmable. I design it for you to read some of the top, some of the headlines, and definitely the bottom, and then kind of get the idea, and then to frustrate the hell out of you that you didn't read the rest of it. But no, I really try to make it rewarding for somebody to come along with me on my museum tour. And I realize that unless you find some of the subject interesting, you're going to bail out the very first exit door through my museum macabre of information, right? And in some ways, I'm okay with that. I want you to kind of leave if I'm not taking you to the place where you want to go. But the people who've come through the entire journey with me, I find that when they interact with me, it's a filter. The people who contact me, Mike and Faisal, the ones that really reach out, they've already been filtered by about 30, 40 gatekeepers, right? So a lot of people say, Brian, how do you take all these calls? I mean, some days I'll have 25, 30 calls directly related to Quora answers in a day, right? And I have to edit myself in the calls sometimes, and I'm very sorry to some people. But what happens is the whole virtue of what I've written has filtered out people who otherwise wouldn't have wanted to contact me. But there's a double-edged sword. It also makes me, and I think Faisal pointed this out maybe in the first show, it makes people feel unapproachable. And
you're right, almost like you're the hot girl at the dance, but you're just too hot.
Yeah, and I'm single, and nobody wants to dance with me. No, but I don't
Brian,
want it to be that way. I
but you know, people who know Brian, who would have followed him for the last couple of years, would have noticed how open he's become, how approachable he's become.
And it's amazing. It really is. Brian, in my words, he was very shy in the early days. And Brian,
I was a nerd.
What's your end game here? I mean, what is, and maybe not as a long-term play, but what do you consistently hope to get out of Quora, right? If you're looking back at your month and saying, boy, how was May in the Quora space, the Quora sphere, if you will?
Well,
how do you determine success?
My numbers are down. No.
I mean, is it consulting work? Do you look for small consulting work? Do you look for advisory positions in startups?
Here's what's really interesting. In my early arguments, these are CEOs of companies right now. I got into some massive arguments, and I love these guys, and we've made peace. They wanted to know, what is your agenda? What is your end game? The thing that was frustrating them is they tried every which way to determine that. The problem was my hidden agenda was I had none. I just simply, if you look at my past, I don't blog. I don't surface my stuff. It's not because I don't want you to know me. It's because I just don't feel that a lot of it is very profoundly interesting.
I don't know about that.
I guess that's why you see me write these dissertations. Is my tick, my quirk is I don't feel like I'm going to offer value unless I give it 200%. That's what I do in my music before anything I believe in. That's when I do my music consulting and artist consulting. I believe that you can't leave a stage unless you can't walk off that stage. This is my view, and it's not a game. I've been influenced by people who were performers that did this, and I would watch them go on a stage, and literally, barfoot is left in their belly out at the back where nobody could see them, crying in a ball. And I'm talking about rock stars. I'm talking about people who you think are rock guards.
Katy Perry?
No, Katy actually would be crying because she felt like she could give more to that performance. Not because of how the audience... You see, when you're on that stage, you don't... Well, when I'm writing, you're not really even... And I'm not saying we don't care. You care about the audience, but you're really caring about your art. how much are you dedicating to what you're doing? And are you giving it everything you possibly can? And I know I'm not asking this of everybody that writes a Quora, by the way, and I'm not asking people to raise their bar or anything. This is just what my journey has been here. And yeah, from the beginning, I'm a very shy, introverted nerd.
It's a beautiful thing, Brian. It got you to come out of your shell.
But I would say, Brian, you're a teacher. You like sharing the knowledge with the same love that you have for it, and that's what goes into your writing.
Yeah, and it's my way of paying back, because I would not be this person I am today, and I love who I am and where I am, if it wasn't for these teachers that helped me. So I feel like I'm giving back. But what's my end game? I don't know. I mean, I talk to my wife, I talk to my good friends, and saying, what are you getting out of it? Well, I have gotten, I can't even count how many job opportunities.
Yeah, I would say you're walking down a very high serendipitous road. Right, you can't necessarily call your shot, but
I don't know, because I mean I had a job offer at the Quora event, and not from Quora, from an individual that showed up there. And I'm not trying to be arrogant here, or I'm turning down jobs. A lot of them, I would take every one of these jobs. Period.
Boy, I think even the guys when we had Sasha on the show over at LendUp, I mean, I think he had such a keen interest in bringing you on if that was something you wanted. So I see where it brings opportunities your way.
Yeah.
Faisal, let me ask you this. If people are coming on to Quora now, and say you sort of break people up into a couple different segments or categories of people, and you have the guys who are now running startups, maybe they've got $1 million in funding, 5 people, and they're just desperate for exposure and traction. How does that person use Quora in a way that gets him visibility? It gives him a return on his investment of time. What does a startup founder do to utilize Quora in the best possible way? Is it to message people? Is it to write solid answers? Is it to?
I think if they want to get noticed, I would hold to my earlier statement. It would take about a year before you get noticed.
I agree.
Properly.
Yeah.
If they want to seek answers to their questions, they can do that from day one. But to be noticed and to become a topic of interest for others to contribute, you must contribute to Quora, and it will take you 1 year, if not more. Now there's so many people now on it.
Now, Mike can't get out of this unscathed. Tell me of your Quora experience, because I've discovered you through here indirectly, and obviously in the early days when you were in a somewhat payment startup, I had great, amazing conversations with you and your founder, and I think they were originally related to Quora. So, what's your experience?
I think it always has to originate from your heart. I think it comes from a place where you see this combination of, they probably won't use this analogy internally, but it's almost Wikipedia meets Facebook, right? It's Facebook just doesn't do it for me. Wikipedia is dry. And Quora is this vibrant, living place of just pure intellect. And that's inherently super interesting to some people. I naturally just gravitated towards it, just started reading, and eventually start contributing. It'd be interesting to see internally at Quora, sort of that absorption of knowledge ratio to sort of divulging of knowledge. And eventually I would start writing, and you sort of write about what you know, because it's by far the easiest topic to write about, as opposed to speculating or answering broad questions. And at the time, we were knee deep, heads deep in web-based point of sale software, and distributing it and building it and everything about it. So I just said to myself, I'm going to write at least one answer every day. And for one day, every day, I would write one answer, and it just turned out to be this momentum builder that after 40 days, I had 45 answers, and it just keeps on steamrolling. And eventually, you meet people, you become, you see who the other players are. People start messaging you, so you start to see the business return for it, which I think is the long-term play. For me, it like you said, Brian, LinkedIn it's just a static resource. Sure, they've got groups, but boy, it's not interactive. You're not building your life from LinkedIn.
Could you imagine some elements on the side, let's say, of what LinkedIn is about within the your profile page on Quora? I think it would be phenomenal. Now, you did a recent blog post which was just absolutely amazing. Now I don't remember it sitting out here without my tools.
The learning sprints.
Oh my God, yes. Now, what motivated you? Because you led me down a whole road with that. That's just
that it's funny. I think the other thing that's interesting about Quora is you really can't anticipate the response you're going to get. I've been thinking about that for well over a year, and just egged on by my buddy to write about it after I went up to San Francisco and told him about it. And he said, you should really write a post on that, and I did, and it shot up to 400 upvotes in less than a week. And for me, that's a pretty I don't have the momentum behind me like you guys do, so that was a pretty big deal. And I think a lot of it just is serendipitous. It's, there's a lot of ideas we all have. You got to just put them out there.
See, that's the information I didn't know I wanted to know. Do you see my point? It's like, if I wasn't following you and I didn't have some connection, here it's hidden in a blog post somewhere deep in the bowels of Quora. And this is what always seems to frustrate me is I get mad when I find an answer from 2010 that I didn't see back in 2010. I'm like, why didn't I do this?
It's funny. There's so many product ideas. So we've got about another minute left. Let me ask Brian, where do you see Quora in 10 years, right? We'll put the spectrum a little outside in terms of the number of people using it, just number of people using it, percentage worldwide. Is it bigger than Facebook? Is it a long-term play? Does it start to take over Wikipedia? What's the magnitude of Quora in 10 years?
Well, it'll never take over Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a dry reiterating and parroting of facts. And that's great if you just want a fact and you walk away. And in the early days of Quora, there was this idea that there were going to be a Wikipedia. And I was one of the rebellious, and I still do that. And I got barred from the science sections because I'm a dissenter. I believe that the knowledge that we know today as a fact will be laughed at 1,000 years from now. And we need to be humble with that notion. And that doesn't mean that you don't, as a domain expert, experienced person and a scientist in the research community, don't state things that, hey, this is what our best, you don't say this is a scientific fact or all of us agree with it. You say this is our best interpretation of our observations today. It's internally self-consistent. So Wikipedia is about that, right? But
let me refrain, Brian. Let me ask you this. What is Quora's endgame, right? Every company either they run out of money and they disappear, they IPO, or they get acquired. Yeah. Which one of those which one of those do you see?
The most crucial thing for Quora is the next 3 years in its entire existence, and primarily the middle of those next 3 years. What's going to happen is they're going to have a cathartic sort of crisis, which I believe that they're going to challenge. They have the minds to challenge this, and that is, how does this scale on a world level, like we spoke to, and how do we stay independent? If they make it through there, you talk about 10 years, this will be larger than
IPO?
Wikipedia. They would have to ultimately either be Google purchased or IPO'd at the 5-year mark.
5 years, Google acquires them?
No,
in 5 years?
I really hope not. I really believe.
I think they can IPO.
Well, I believe they can IPO. I believe that is the ultimate end game. I believe 5 to 7 years. 7 years is too long, perhaps.
All right, 6 years, they're going to IPO. Brian,
yes.
Faisal, what do you think?
I think, for me, it's just, I don't even think, as far ahead as you guys do. I'm just thinking, how can they retain their existing top writers and the existing crowd?
Yeah.
That's very important for me.
Mm-hmm. So what's their end game and what amount of time? IPO, acquisition?
I think acquisition, probably about 5 years.
And by Google?
I agree with Brian. I hope not.
All right, guys, this has been a great show.
Well, let me just say
Brian,
this.
You got a closing remark? Let's hear it.
Yeah, let me say this, that I am extremely, extremely thankful for what Quora has done. I'm thankful for you guys and all of the listeners that I think primarily are being drawn from Quora initially, and now I think we're expanding and hopefully drawing people into what Quora is about. If you're listening to this broadcast, join up, and it's okay to be along the wall and to be shy. 99% of what I do at Quora is I'm an observer. I really feel like I'm not giving enough back on what I've given out,
It is incredible. Just this podcast itself would not have been created. I wouldn't know you guys. That's a fact. It wasn't for Quora. So
Absolutely.
So join in, anybody listening, join in, and you do have something of great knowledge to share. And I'm not trying to be Mr. Nice Guy. I really do. If you dig deep, there is that question. And guess what? If that question doesn't exist, Go and write it yourself and answer it yourself. Nobody cares.
Love that.
I do that a lot. Just
Love that. You can be wrong.
You can be wrong, and you can maybe upvote yourself a few times. I don't know how you do it.
All right, guys.
All right. Wonderful show, guys. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Talk next week.